Hi, everyone. It's Angela here at Polymath Place. I'm so excited about our guest today, Mark Fisher. I met Mark through our mutual friend and colleague, Barry James. They're working on some really cool stuff together that I've gotten brought into. So I'm really excited for this conversation because for me, Mark is an example of what a really, really strong polymath does in the world. And we'll talk more about that later. But Mark, to get started, could you just tell any viewers or listeners a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nice. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for the invite, Angela. My name is Mark Fisher. I am 47 years old. I live in the UK near London, actually near Windsor, in fact. And I am the founder and head of product at Finexos. And Finexos has a vision of using AI and machine learning to help more people access credit at affordable rates and indeed help the rest of the world to build effectively using AI.
I love it. So, Mark, what I've observed about you with Finexos and some of the other projects you're working on is that you're a highly intelligent, highly capable man
Wow.
seeing the global problems we're having. What you want to use your talent for good to help people and the planet.
Right.
And you think in very interdisciplinary systems ways, and you have a lot of tools in your toolkit to help you achieve something like founding Finexus. So I'd love to learn more about like how did you become this strong polymath? Like what was it in your upbringing or your thinking or your challenges or your opportunities? Like what do you think made you such a like capable polymath?
That's a wow, that's a really great question. I suppose without differentiating yourself from people, we probably had some different experiences. I think, particularly at an early stage of life, most people that I could speak to in my circle have had some form of a traumatic experience. Which has led them to develop it rewires the brain in a way where you've got to think at a different level. You've got to be thinking of quite a lot of different things. You become a problem solver. You don't want to add to problems. You try to reduce them for people. But when you experience something like that, you also share huge empathy with other people who are going through it or have gone through it, especially those with you. And as a result of that, we're very creative in finding ways to make people feel better about themselves. We tend to take on quite a lot of the responsibility. And I think the key for us is that by somehow repairing or making something better, it takes a burden and weight off the people around you. So it's a lot of responsibility. So I think from my early years, unfortunately, a couple of two family members of mine passed away quite early. I was young myself at the time, and I could see the pressure on my parents. I could see the effect on the community around me, and I just over time it became more so that I really wanted to take some of that pain away. And that kind of transpired into a much bigger overall mission is when you really have a real sense of yourself, and that sense gives you the ability to choose things that you can see with your help could potentially be better. And this is why I've spent probably over a decade now researching and building technology ultimately to help people who really can't help themselves or feel powerless. And that's just become my mission over the last decade, as I say. So the multidisciplinary things means you've got to learn, you've got to have a good understanding of quite a lot of different fields. I love education. I love to learn. I'm very open to scientific, political, and business activities because I see a link to all three very simply in my mind is if you get it all working together as a system, and inject that level of enthusiasm at different levels and bring people together, you get fantastic outcomes from it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love so much of what you said there. Take the pain away. So for me, I've been thinking about polymathy as a human phenomenon now for about a decade, like in a real serious, like doctoral level, and after my doctoral program kind of way, bringing it to social media, writing, speaking about it. And for me, you're kind of like an example of what an ideal modern polymath looks like. Because obviously, polymathy comes in different forms and combinations. It exists on a spectrum. Some people are more polymathic in their journey, and others have kind of like they really are masters in multiple disciplines and contributing in their fields in significant ways. And so I would call you a polymath. I know you may feel um, you know, you don't want to be boastful. Some polymaths don't want to claim it, but I will bestow that upon you. You are an excellent modern day polymath. And part of what it is, like I sort of alluded to this earlier, but it's that you're using your intelligence for good to help other people at a global scale in interdisciplinary ways. And that's not an easy thing to do. And one of the things you said a minute ago is that you know, you feel this responsibility to help people who cannot help themselves. You're using your intelligence and your capabilities for good. I find that very inspiring. Of course, some polymaths use their powers for gain, personal, you know,
Mm.
reasons, ego fulfillment. Some of them may even have malevolent agendas.
Right.
Uh, People can use their intelligence for bad, or some people might call it evil, or whatever
Right.
the correct word is. But I really see you using in a real passionate, dedicated way, like for years on end, in a really, um, yeah, like in a you're committed to
Right.
use life to help those who need help. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so I guess like if you imagine that you are an old man nearing the end of your human life here on earth, like what would you like to be able to look back and know that you accomplished for humanity and for your own life and the people you care about?
I'll share a vision that I've had with you because the Finexus is all about giving people that financial freedom, the moving on from a system that doesn't work for them into one that does. And I've often had this vision of I'm standing in a bank queue somewhere and somebody has the card or the app on the wallet and I'm standing behind them and I'm overhearing a conversation where only for this, I'd be screwed or since I've started using this, things have really started to change for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know who I am because I actually want to remain anonymous in it. It
Mm-hmm.
would just be amazing to say, wow. And this is when I'm older. This is like, I'll always remain young. I think in a way, I think that's another
Mm-hmm.
polymathic thing. Can't
Yeah.
envision, a point where we can no longer contribute. Um, but just to say that in 20 years' time, I'm in a queue somewhere, or I hear somebody say that, wow, I would just be that was worthwhile years of struggle, it was worthwhile. So that's the kind of a vision that I have. And it's what I can do once we're in a place where there's funding, there's additional funding, it's generating. It's who else is going to come through that people don't spot or they don't see and they don't understand the capability of that person and being able, just like you are right now, Angela. Because I didn't even know what a polymath was until our friend Barry had a conversation with me about it and introduced me to you. So we're very unaware that I would say the genuine people, that the genuine polymaths are unaware of it because to us it's just what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can spot more people and help more people to and support them just as you are, perhaps with ideas or indeed the funding that they need to create those ideas, that to me would be a well spent life.
Yeah, I love
It
that.
excites me even thinking about it.
Yeah. You know, listeners or viewers might be wondering, well, can you tell us a little bit more about Finexus? Like, what does it do for
Sure.
people? What is the power of it? Like, what would you like to
Sure.
highlight about that tool that you've created?
Sure. Well, Angela, like many people, I haven't always been successful in that respect, and I lost a business. Oh wow, 12, 13 years ago. During the 2008 crash, everything went bad. The economy in Ireland tanked. And yeah, it got very serious. But literally, I went from living a very comfortable life. I always worked hard. But overnight, it was gone. And there was no blanket, there was no safety net, there was nothing to catch you. So I ended up in a situation where I went from having a stable life to having pretty much nothing. And I moved to the UK. I moved to London. I was living in Ireland at the time. And I moved to London and I didn't know anybody. I had no support network. I had pretty much nothing. So I experienced what it feels to be powerless. Because despite all of the great ideas I might have had, or the feel good attitude I had, it was there, but I had no way of doing anything with it. And I remember being in a shopping shop one day, a supermarket, and I had £5 to feed myself for a week. Okay. And when you say we share innate experiences and we empathize, well, now I know a lot of people in the UK at the time did not even have that money to spend. They had children, and I was just trying to figure out how the hell are they doing this? And the answer is probably with great difficulty. So, on top of that, I had a huge amount of debt. It was very difficult to keep your attitude, and there were some dark times, I suppose, when I think back, and I'm just trying to think how many people are going through this on a daily basis, and how can I fix this if I get out of this myself?
Mm.
And the answer to it was I started researching the credit markets. I started looking at all of the stats around poverty. The place where I was living close by had the highest child poverty rate in Europe. I was going, wow, in a first tier economy, we have this level of poverty, right? What do we need to do? So what I was looking at was the credit scoring system. How it is, how did actually, if it goes against you, you're pretty much screwed because it's a cycle. It's very difficult to break it, and your reliance on handouts or social benefit, if that's what you get, and you get stuck further into the circle. If you try to take yourself out, they'll you take out a high interest credit product, your credit score goes down. You have to move house, your credit score goes down. If you get divorced, if you get ill, anything happens, the credit score goes down. So you're powerless. You don't really have the ability to change that situation. So I went and created an entirely new metric. It's called financial capability scoring. And this came from the idea that I was really managing my money really well, although I hadn't got a lot of it, but I was still living, I was surviving. So what I realized is that people who are often on the lowest income have to manage that money a lot better than others do. Okay. They don't have the luxury of spending $50 on a meal or going out for drinks every week. They'll have children at home at times and stuff like that. So that ability to manage money is a superpower. Okay. And what I wanted to be able to do, just like the polymathy side of things, is identify those people who are super money managers and give them the benefit of that. And then convince a lender that this guy, this woman is a much better credit risk because they're used to managing money. And it's not for an extravagance, it's actually to increase their social or financial mobility, and feed their kids better, or take their kids on a trip out, or do something with the house, but it's worthwhile and they will pay you the money back.
Mm.
And that was just an idea, and that was based on experience and empathy. And as a result of it, I put a team of people in around me who again much cleverer than I am, and had done similar projects like that, and in fact proved that my metric could outperform a credit score. And when we got that evidence back, it was just one of those yes moments. Yeah, I had a feeling, which became an idea, and the idea is now proven. So we're beyond concept. And the whole idea then of using artificial intelligence to detect more of those people who are excluded in the mainstream financial markets, or are subjugated, or are stuck in a cycle that through no fault of their own they can't get back out of it. Well, this is where Finexus comes in. And the word, it actually says that it's financial exodus. It's to take people out of the system that isn't working and replace it with a system that works just for them. Everybody else benefits, remember. So if people are taking out credit products, if they're taking out home loans and the lender's getting repaid, and the default rate is really low, well, the lender's won, yeah? The borrower is getting the benefit of the cash and what the cash can do to get them out of the cycle. But if you look at the next level systemically, the regulation around it means, wow, okay, this system seems to be working better for people. Why isn't it adopted at government level? Can it go to another country? Yes. Can it open up markets in countries where there isn't any credit score? Yes. So all of a sudden that radial expansion starts to add multiple layers. So I'm now looking at into projects around carbon capture. I'm looking into, how we help excluded populations access a safe credit product. So it just propagates. You get the core of it right. Everything else just starts to move off. So our learning, again, what we're really interested in learning new things, aren't we? So looking into which plants capture carbon more so than others. I'm looking into the renewable energy side of things. How do we give people back power and control of their own destiny, their own life, starting off for a micro loan of maybe $100? And that just blows my mind out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm constantly thinking how, and the use of AI. And I know there's a lot of people out there that there are a lot of horror stories around what potentially AI could do. Well, that's a weaponized form of AI. Let's be really clear on that. The way I view AI is just like the guy thousands of years ago who came along with a plow and he said, you want to try use this on your field and see how quickly you can furrow the land, you can plant and so forth, and look at the yield that you'll get back off the land. That's how I see it. And you mentioned something earlier on about being on the good side, and there are people that would use these tools for bad. There are. They're also polymaths. They're also thinking on different levels of how they can personally gain or their network will gain from it. Whereas we're on the balancing side and we're saying, well, that's the bad news. Now show people a good news story and bring people towards you and get them involved in it and let them see the practicality, the applications, the results, the outcomes, and focus on that. Because you'll always there's a balance in the universe, isn't there? They're always going to be there. Unfortunately, though, the damage that they can do with it means that a lot of people are quite scared, and rightly so in some cases.
Yeah, the old financial system has really been designed so that those in charge of it will benefit greatly. Those who work in banking or lending, like they can make a great salary off of poor people who need loans.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
by kind of subjugating others, they benefit. And that model is really kind of unethical and inhumane. So the beautiful thing about Finexos is it's sort of leveling the playing field.
Right.
I have so many thoughts and I want to respond to. First off, I want to go back to the beginning when you were saying how like you went through your own period of experiencing poverty, basically.
Right.
That trauma sort of inspired all of this. So isn't that interesting how sometimes it's the hardships we go through that can inspire us to become better and help others?
It is. Yeah, and if you want to be genuine, Angela, if you want to be, see, people will understand I am genuine because I have experienced it. I'm not trying to sell the fact that if you were to do this, this might happen for you without having ever experienced it. So it's not a confidence-based sale in any way. It's experience-based. This is what happened to me. I was lucky to get through it. Now, how many other people are going through the same process unnecessarily? And what can I do today to alleviate that? And bringing it back to the whole world of finance, because we're slaves to money. Let's be quite honest. We can't go anywhere. We can't eat food. We're trapped in that model today. And what I've deduced from it is that knowledge is the key. And it depends how scarce you make that knowledge, because if you make it scarce enough, it becomes more valuable. So you've got these high-level consultants, you know, presenting plans, presenting models of what could potentially be. They've never experienced it. And the thing about it is, if I use AI, I can neutralize their knowledge pretty quickly. And that's a threat. Because if I share that knowledge, it's like Prometheus, right? If you share that, you become the people become the god, not the gods, not the guys who are holding all the power up at the top. You equalize that through the sharing of knowledge and experiences, and you build tech around that to alleviate or neutralize or bridge. So, for example, in the app that we built for the Yidiji sovereign nation down in Australia, the app isn't a normal banking app. It's AI bridging the financial literacy gap, helping people to understand what happens next if you don't, but what if you do? And rather than the AI actually controlling everything, it automates up to 70% of the day-to-day functions that you would have to think about in order to successfully complete a program. The 30% that is there is the cognitive decisioning power that the human brings to this. So you're making the decision to tell the machine to do yes or no. The machine is just calculating the outcome of that decision. So this is the piece where I can actually, I can argue with the experts around the use of AI. It is not designed to take over. It is designed to carry the load, compute, produce an outcome, a desired outcome that the human wants to see happen for them. Yeah.
You know what this makes me feel like? It's like if I had an app that said, well, you can have that piece of cake or you can have some eggs. Like, here's
It
what's
gives
going
you
to happen on the
choice.
scale. It's a choice.
Choice. It gives you choice. You decide what the outcome of that decision is, and then tell the machine to go and do it.
Yeah.
Now, look. For example, if I'm living in a situation whereby I'm in abject poverty, I'm on my own. I've probably got children. I've got to think of all these things that are going on every second of the day. Think of the cognitive load that person is carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think if you had an assistant doing 70% of those tasks on your behalf and you could focus on the really important things, surely that would be a good thing.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. Someone posted in the Polymath Place Facebook group a few months back, like, if you could fix one global problem, what would you fix? And of course, people are picking things like global warming or hatred or whatever. And for me, I responded, my answer was I would fix poverty. That for me,
Right.
that was my number one that I'm most concerned about. Not because poverty itself is a trauma and it's unpleasant, but because I've seen what it leads to. Poverty itself isn't just a standalone experience. When you have a human animal in survival mode,
Right.
they will do horrible things sometimes. Some of them will just survive and just get through it without doing horrible things. But having looked at the courts and the prisons in the United States quite deeply, I've seen, well, a lot of the people who are in prison are poor people who made a bad choice because they were
Right.
an animal that was trying to survive and could. And also, it's not that it prevents bad things from happening. Like, if you eradicate poverty or reduce poverty, yes, it reduces bad behaviors that the human animal will do to survive.
Right.
But it also does the flip side, is it frees people to step into their potential. And as someone who's very concerned about human thriving and human possibility through the lens of polymathy, I think that if you get to the root, like if you solve poverty, our world could really flourish. So the thing I like about this tool and this multidisciplinary, I mean, it's fintech, it's finance, and it's tech.
Yeah.
And so it's really multidisciplinary in nature and also impact at a global scale. Like, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing that you created. I can't wait for it to take off and revolutionize the finance world, and help so many millions or billions of people potentially and reduce poverty on the global scale. I'm just so grateful that you exist, that you made it through your own dark night of the soul and used
Right.
your traumatic experience for good. Um,
Well, one thing that you said, Angela, is poverty is avoidable.
yes.
And that's the piece that kills me, is that it doesn't have to be. Somebody's made a decision to have it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, back to choice. I would like an alternative to that. And you know, we're not here to save everybody on earth. I mean, that's probably more implausible. What we're here to do is to give people a choice,
Mhm.
provide them with the tools that will help them to thrive. If they thrive, your generations thrive. People can hand down skills, people can hand down wealth. Unfortunately, it's very fractionated at the moment, and what we have is a society that actually quite likes to live in tiers. They like tiers. Tiers give almost a sense of, oh, well, at least I'm not living down there. I'm up here. I must be safe. But let me give you some anecdotal proof that that is not the case, because the issues that we've seen globally with the inflationary concerns, and interest rates on the rise. Traditionally, you would think that people with financial difficulties would be, let's say, in the low 20s, 30, 20s downwards. Yeah. Well, that's gone right up to over $100,000. And that means that you, even on $100,000 salary now, you're no longer safe. If you thought you were, that was a comfort zone. And what do I mean by that? So your costs are proportional to your income. And the people that you hang out with and your social circles and the house that you live in and the car that you drive is all attached to that. So if you've gone out and bought a new car only a year or so ago, or if you've you build a new house and you were on a low rate of interest, and that interest tripled. Well, you weren't expecting that. So back to the people I was saying at the lower end who are used to having no money, they manage money better.
Mm.
What we've seen is that even though the rates were going up, even though price of goods and services was going up, your fuel bill went up, your gas bill went up, they kept spending. Now we're looking at the depletion of savings. So they've maintained that level of expenditure throughout a period of high interest and inflation. Credit card expenditure's gone up. Default has gone up because these people are not used to these kind of things happening.
Mhm.
Okay, so there are no more comfort zones, and what we do need is something to check our homework in such a way that will just, do you really want to do that? Because that's going to have a knock-on effect of $700 here. It's going to mean you're going to deplete your credit card balance to 2.4 months earlier. You're going to accrue interest on a monthly basis of this. Imagine if you knew all of this, if you were actually running those calculations in the background, would it stop you doing it? Maybe not, but would it make you think twice? That's the piece. And this is again back to the AI and how you use it.
Mhm.
Because if I knew that that decision was going to cost me $700 a year and more interest on my credit card, and I wasn't going to be able to have a holiday the following year, would I still do it?
No, I think it's a beautiful tool to really project. I mean, it's almost like an extension of the prefrontal cortex. You know,
Right.
the human brain has this amazing front brain, the
Yeah.
forebrain, which helps us predict if this, then that. And your
Right.
tool is basically extending what makes us
Right.
uniquely human. It's the
Yeah.
prediction abilities.
But who
Um,
does it work for? It just works for me.
yeah.
It's tailored to me. Now, sorry, Angela, I just wanted to come
Mhm.
back to the point where the people at so the tiered structure, there is no safety in it. There's no
Mm.
safety whatsoever. So it's almost equalizing people into the same situation because nobody wants to lose their home, right? So if you're on $100,000 salary right now and you're in arrears, or you've depleted your savings, your credit card balance is going up, it's time to take a second look at it. So money isn't the saving piece; it's how you use the money. And as a fellow once told me, money's a commodity like anything else. Doesn't care who owns it. It just happens to trickle down to the people who know how to use it.
It's like a game almost.
There you go. So equalize the game.
Yeah.
Use. So you change the rules to suit to improve the outcome for everybody else. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people up here that don't like that approach. But as a polymath, I really don't care.
I know. Their system's broken and immoral. What I love
Right.
about your what you've created is that it really makes judgments about lending and credit that's based on their decision making ability, not their whatever level of the caste system we
Right.
unofficially have throughout the world. I mean, I've been exposed to so many humans, whether it, from my days working at the executive office of the president to my time researching the experience of modern day prisoners and all the kinds of people in between. And for me, I see a human as a human. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what they have in their bank account or what their resume says. I care more about the quality of their character. Can they make a good decision? Can they use their prefrontal cortex, or are they going to behave like selfish animals in survival mode and or greed and selfishness? Like, I really care about what kind of choice can you make. And I love that your app really encourages good decision making and incentivizing people to good decision making.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to share about, if you don't mind, just going back to really what a trauma poverty is I haven't spoken too much about this publicly, but I was raised by my dad and his and his parents. And actually, there's my grandma.
I love it. I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's my grandmother.
Right.
She's such an important person to me. I have her tattooed on my arm. She's always
Wow. That's
so I was raised by Depression era grandparents. And so I had a front row seat to like what happens when a child grows up in pretty severe poverty. I mean, my grandmother there was born in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, and kind of in the middle of the country. And her father died when she was young. They were I've gone to the town where my grandmother was from, and there's like 10 houses and a general store. There's like nothing there. And they had to resort to eating squirrel and turtles and stuff like that because they were so poor. Eventually, my great grandmother took her two daughters California, and she became a migrant worker picking produce. And I remember my great grandmother, and she lived in a trailer. Like I come from poor people, and my grandfather, who I grew up living with, George, he also grew up in poverty. Like his dad died when he was young. He was one of 6 children with a single mother in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, on a dairy farm. So at least they had some means of like getting cow's milk. And my grandfather told me many times like he just ate milk and bread because that's all they had. And so I got to see like what happens to an adult who survives, because I grew up with, and my grandmother, for example, just hoarded food. We had like 2 refrigerators, a full-size freezer, a huge pantry with tons of canned goods, and like just like eat everything on your plate. There are children starving in the world in certain places. And so I it was like this lifelong burden, this fear my grandmother had about not having enough food, which sounds so bizarre in the modern world, but like I grew up with a person afraid of not having enough food. And then my grandfather just worked like my grandfather's mom had told him, work hard and save your money, or a fool and his money are soon parted. Like there were all these
right.
things
Yeah.
he used to say. He worked manual labor his whole life. He built homes in the San Francisco area, and he didn't know how to enjoy his money. Actually, he was just so afraid of being
Right.
poor ever again that he just
Resonate with all of that. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm the benefit of my grandparents, financial, their willingness to like work hard and save their money benefits me now. And I've seen how much like generational wealth can really change the trajectory of a person's life. It can give them, the only reason I really am able to promote Polymath the way I am is because I have some side income from real estate I inherited. And I worked hard in government, like I was financially savvy. And I'm not meaning to make this about me, but I kind of just want to share a story about like how poverty can impact generations and my own experiences with it. My mother also was an immigrant from Cuba, a refugee, and has experienced a lot of poverty in her life. And it really limits like how much a person can do when you don't have resources. And when you do have resources, you can change the world and do lots of good things. It frees you from survival mode. So I know when a lot of people think about finance or debt, it's like this cold topic that's like distant or something. It's really something that impacts our day-to-day lives in such fundamental ways. And it can cause such tremendous trauma that it's hard to break the cycle too. If you're born into poverty and you get debt and you're not able to get those chances and opportunities because of lack of financing available, or or the ability to earn like a good salary or to become an entrepreneur. Like there's so much that needs to be done in our world to really support people who have lacked opportunity and to give that to them. And it really is incumbent upon the smart, capable polymaths of the world to help lift up those who are suffering in poverty.
Yeah, well, I have to say, wow, while I was listening to your story, the word resilience kept coming to mind, and you're the product of resilience and
Yes.
people trying no matter what to produce a better outcome. And it's very close to this whole topic, that we're talking about today. And the fact is, you've touched on a number of points that poverty, it was unavoidable then. We're in a depression, but they did whatever they had to do to survive, and with a little bit of help, more people will do that. And you've got a great story. You ended up in the White House, and I know you're very humble, but to say you did that, it's like that's amazing. That's like just to think that and we're not talking that long ago. We're talking like what 120, 130 years ago. It's not even that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How bad the situation was then to you actually sitting in the White House with the President of the United States and working on huge level projects. And that only took 120 years. But if those people had not have been as resilient as they were holding out for some good, for an outcome that was positive, and you were that outcome. So how many people out there who poverty's not a choice in that case, but the will, the desire, help me, like $100 microloan could springboard them into a new business, could buy them a bike, could help them get to work, would help them go to a city, could help them, build a business. And I use this example down in Australia. If you give a guy who's sitting around pretty much because nobody wants to harm me, I live in a little small town and in the outback somewhere, let's say, but it's a big city 20 miles away, and I can't walk 20 miles there and 20 miles back. But if I got a loan for a motorbike, a moped even, I can make that journey. I turn up, I do a fantastic job. The guy says, have you got anybody else? Yeah, I'll bring my friend tomorrow with me. He sits on the back of the bike. Now you share the expense of it, the finance. Then the guy says, wow, okay, can you bring me four more guys? So I trade in the bike and buy a van. And I put six guys in the van and we go, and all of a sudden I've got a company out of nothing.
Mhm.
But it started with a really small amount of money. And that's what I think, when we look at the world in two halves, with the haves and have-nots, the people who have not are not that far away from having.
Mhm.
So let's help them.
Yeah.
But if the system doesn't want to help them, create a new one.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, by helping people who are struggling, you help everybody. Because
Right.
what happens is when you let people suffer in a very pretty much dehumanized ways, like people in poverty sometimes are living like animals. I mean, it
Right.
just snowed here in Washington, D.C., and it broke my heart. I went into the nation's capital just a few days ago on MLK Day. I wanted to take my daughter to where
Yeah.
Martin Luther King had given his speech. And
Yeah.
so we went to DC and there's snow everywhere and it's continuing to snow. And it broke my heart to see homeless people living in tents in that weather.
Right.
Um, and so what can happen when you empower people and you lift them out of survival mode and poverty is that it helps everyone because then you reduce crime, you reduce, kind of a difficult thing to look at that's in the public streets
Yeah,
potentially.
sure. Let's call it out. Yeah, it is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to share as well. I know, my grandfather was born in 1921 and my grandmother was born in 1933. So we're talking like about 100 years ago when they were
Yeah.
born and the depression happened. And from what I've heard of from them, like we're also in an economic crisis now globally, like
Right.
inflation rate, like even with a six-figure salary, people are struggling.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who profit off of people who are
Right.
subjugated. Like that's okay. That's very strange to me. Um, but back in my grandparents' age, there was this more feeling of how can I, even though I'm struggling, how can I help those around me? My grandparents did this throughout their life. Like at my grandfather's funeral, God, there were so many people who got up and had said that like they had struggled financially and all the things that, I mean, there were times growing up where my grandparents would let people stay with us, or they'd give them
Right.
money, or they'd help them start a business. There were, you know, and all of my grandfather's houses that he built, they were all low income houses. You
Wow.
know, they were, so that we grew up around people who were not rich
Yes.
as our clients, and giving them reasonably affordable housing. And, you know, Section 8 is like the government program to help people who can't afford to pay their rent. So that is our audience that we work with in our family real estate business. But
Mhm.
nowadays, it seems like that attitude that used to exist during the Great Depression of like, how can I, if I make it, how can I help lift someone out as well? Or I'm struggling, but here, have half of my food, or, you know, that sort of ethos has gone away for some reason in the modern world, where people are more
Right.
focused. At least this is what I see. There's a lot of people who are just really focused on their own needs
Right.
more than
Right.
that of their neighbors. Have you seen that as well? Is that
Yeah,
your
this is really cool because I share this. I grew up in both my parents were working class people. My dad was a laborer, my mom was a seamstress. She when she fell pregnant with me, she left her job. My dad went out, he provided, he did all of that stuff. But we lived, and my grandparents, and I love you sharing these stories because it's brought back fond memories for me. We lived in a place in Dublin called Ballyfermot, and it was socioeconomic low zone. It was a lot of people that had been moved out of the city originally because the tenements in Dublin were extreme poverty, and people got a chance of probably a Section 8 house. I think was quite similar to that. But they had communities. I mean, the entire street. I could bring it back to the point where people had their key in their door. You could literally walk up to a neighbor's house and just walk in, right? Um, the old attitude, pop in for a bowl of sugar or a cup of sugar or whatever. People, my grandfather grew his additional food. They had 12 children, my grandparents.
wow?
So think about this, right? He grew all his vegetables out the back. He had chickens. He worked though. He had a full-time job. Gran stayed at home and ran the house, and she was the financial wizard at home. So all the envelopes were always there. Pay this, pay that. But because she was so good, neighbors would come in and say, "Would you mind? Could I borrow a few pound? Could I do this?" And the answer was always yes. And it just brought that back to me that it was community where people didn't live off each other. They lived together.
Mm.
And that's really important now today. It's dog eat dog because everybody's terrified. Nobody can trust anybody. Somebody will steal your last $100. If that's all you had, they'd run off with it. Crime is up. So we've lost the sense of community, and it is bringing us back to some of those rules. And I've seen lots of very successful projects around where actually families come together, put a pot of money and help people to travel abroad or help them to go to school. And that's the cooperative thing. And I really like cooperatives.
Mm.
I think they bring the best out of the system. We're all shareholders or, in that process. So everybody benefits. And that's what your folks were doing. They benefited other people. Now, ultimately, you're the one benefiting from that. So, how many more of those models can we build, or how do we build that into a system now? And this is great because I mean, I'm scribbling down stuff here on the notebook because this is shared knowledge, shared experience,
Mm.
positive outcomes that they're anecdotal. You can prove to me that this has happened because you're actually sitting in front of me telling me right now.
Yeah.
And this is just this is the way it goes. Like, I mean, you've started a little spark here. Now, by tomorrow, I'll be thinking, how do I deploy this? How would I train an AI to do that
Mm.
effectively? That's the way I would start to compose an idea, concept, and then go to somebody and say, look, this could really help. I don't know, 100 million people just live up that are on the poverty line, live 10-20% above the poverty line. Is that going to have a massive impact? Possibly. I would say probably, not possibly. Because if you think I don't have to steal something this month,
Yeah.
even if I don't want to go in and shoplift this month. I don't want to have to do those things. I hate myself for doing it, but I'm in survival mode and it's done. Um, but this little tool or this bit of help that I've been given means I don't have to do that anymore. And I no longer feel chained to it. I feel free to a point. What have you actually done? You haven't put him on 100 grand salary. you've probably just given them an extra $400 or $500 a month, but you're not giving it to them. They're generating it themselves. You've given them the opportunity to build a gig business on the side. Nobody needs to know that, you shoplifted 10 times, or you have a criminal record because of what I would term to be something that is a necessity. Nobody needs to know that you're a refugee. Nobody needs to know any of that. So the whole anonymization piece, the AML and KYC checks are there to ensure that you are not a criminal in the sense of you're money laundering, you're involved in high level crime, you haven't got a severe criminal record. But if people have had to do misdemeanor level things, and again, I'm not trying to justify that either, but I'm saying to you that if people have to make those types of decisions, it's because of the situation that they've been put in. Take
Yes.
them out of that situation and then help them to start building a future going forward, and then check the stats to see where the reduction in those minor type situations will happen. And I think this is where the gig economy is going to be really important. I
Mm.
think people should have 2 or 3 side jobs.
Polymathic.
I think they
It's
should.
it's a safety net. Oh God,
It
I feel,
is.
you know what? There are so many specialists whose jobs are being automated by AI right now. And
Right.
because they bought into the narrative that being specialized is the thing to do, now they don't really have any other skill sets developed and they're scrambling. I'm really worried about the
Right.
specialists of the world whose jobs are automated,
Right. You've
you
been
know?
pigeonholed and you've labeled yourself. The minute you put a label on yourself, I don't care what that label is, but if you say, I am this, very easy to determine what or how to control you with.
Mm,
Very, very easy. So the whole point is that if we took this back thousands of years, people had roles, but that role may have meant you needed 3 or 4 different skills, and that meant you couldn't be replaced that easy.
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
so if all I'm doing now is I'm rubbing a stone on to mill the grain. If that's all I can do, I can't hunt, I can't go down and get a bucket of water, I can't fish, I can't what all the other things that would be needed. Well, if anything happens to you, well, it's really not a big deal. But if something was to happen to the main guy, whoever was out hunting at that stage, that would be a major loss. So we need to
mhm.
multi-skill people now,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and unlock some of the creativity inside, because there's so many people who are really creative who are scared to be creative. That's the other thing.
Mm, mm.
Because if you start thinking, you could become dangerous. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it takes guts to really
Yeah.
be original and to really bring your true authentic self to the world. It takes guts and confidence. And it
Yeah.
takes a certain kind of good heart to to use your life to help people in the ways that you're doing. One of the things I want to give a quick shout out to my favorite YouTube channel. I'm a YouTuber
Yeah.
myself, but of course I consume tons of I think I probably watch YouTube more than TV. I hardly watch any TV, but I love YouTube. And my favorite channel, it really, oh God, it changed my life, I think. It's called The Soft White Underbelly. There's a
Okay.
filmmaker who interviews the, let's call them the untouchables of the world, the
Right.
prostitutes, the drug dealers, the criminals, the drug addicts, the homeless people, the kinds of people that professionals or like people who aren't in those worlds would never speak to and never get to know. And when you watch enough of these interviews, you begin to see a common pattern, which is that
Right.
you were born into a difficult situation and they really didn't have many options. And if you were in their shoes, you might make those same choices and end up homeless and on drugs. Like
Right.
it's we need more empathy and compassion and understanding in our world and less judgment. We also need more help and less punishment. And we also need more cooperation and less competition. And if we don't make these changes as a collective, as a species, as a humanity, if we don't shift, we will continue to make this earth more and more hellish. And if we do make these changes, we can co-create a heaven here, I think. What are your
I
thoughts on that?
totally agree. Totally agree. Listen, I've hung out with people on that level, purely because of the neighborhoods that I lived in, and I mean they were always very kind, and I mean when people I experienced this that like okay, somebody will tell you something about somebody else, but it's up to you whether or not you want to join in on that, or you want to say, well, in all fairness, they're having a tough time. Give them a break. There's always a bully. There's always somebody that wants to point out the negative. Well, at the end of the day, I'll continue talking to you, and I see you as a human being. And I remember somebody saying that to me. He said to me, "I see you," and I was like, "What? What do you mean?" He says, "No, I could see you're a really good person. I could see you." And the amount of it gave me a huge sense of, really, wow, I am a good person, but I'm terrified to tell anybody that I am. I've got to pretend I'm not, right? So we build those personas, and we build those egos and those protective egos to try and ensure that somebody really doesn't get that close to us. But unfortunately, for those people, they're laid bare. And you've seen the YouTube videos and stuff where people have come along and they'll second guess somebody. There'll be $100 on the back of the thing. He's asking for $1. There's $100 on the back. He's asking for $1, and most people will just walk past. And then somebody will start rooting, and then boom, and you turn the cup around. There's $100 on it. It just takes little things. It doesn't always have to be $100, but you will get a reward from it.
Yeah,
And
it
back
feels
to
good. It feels
Yeah, you
good to
made
be
another point
generous.
about competition. Competition is there to give us choice and a saving if it's possible. So one firm competes against the other. What we can't be is competing against ourselves.
Hmm.
It's counterintuitive and it's counterproductive, to be fair.
Yeah, I think competition in business is great.
Yeah,
Like we need
it's brilliant.
options. Yeah, but this kind of I need to hold you down so I can stand up. That flavor of
That's
competition I find disgusting and inhuman.
good.
Like,
You just got to look at the leadership models, and if that's seen to be is that if that is being seen to be the way, and you can only get ahead by standing on someone else's back. That's really not the case. It's some kind of narrative that's being created out there. It's the kind of the old Wall Street thing, where you saw all the guys drinking bottles of champagne, and some guys lost tens of millions of dollars, and somebody else is cheering off the back of it. And there's a place for it, and it should encourage people to be more and compete at a healthy level. Sport being another example,
right.
but there's what are you winning when you beat somebody that's already down?
Yeah, I think about, so I have been in the polymathy space for a long time now. And one of the decisions I made about 3 or 4 years ago was I decided one of the critiques of my doctoral dissertation was that I only looked at very elite polymaths. And that hit me like a ton of bricks because I am not someone who wants to promote elitism, even though I've worked in fancy places and know some fancy people. I also come from real plain people. My grandmother who raised me didn't even have a high school diploma, and I think she was a genius. Like she used to beat attorneys in court. She was so smart and so good at
Wow.
self-directed learning. But I've taken quite a close look, as I mentioned, at who's in prison. And believe it or not, a lot of people profit. A lot of people are profiting off of the business of human imprisonment and torture and slavery. And oh God, it's so ugly. Like, and for me, because I came from government, I spent 15 years working in government. I really went there because I thought I want to be a part of making the world a better place. And
Right.
for me, government was, it seemed like that was the place to do it. And government all over the world, they do some good and then they do some harm. And for me, the place where the biggest harm is done by government is in the prisons and the courts because it keeps subjugated people
Yeah,
subjugated. And there's a
yeah.
shift happening, like the state of California where I'm from, they've got this California model that they're implementing now, which is based on the Norway as an example, where it's really more about rehabilitation and less about punishment. The imprisonment itself is the punishment. You don't got to treat them like animals while you're at it. And so, yeah, like I said, a lot of the people that I've gotten to know many prison inmates, probably at least a dozen or 15, as as an academic, sort of casually getting to hear their stories and their experiences, and some common themes among them, like I said, have been just lack of opportunity and poverty, and it just forces them into, when you're homeless and you need to eat, well, what are you going to do? You're going to anyway, or if you have a baby
You got
that
to
needs
steal. You got to do something, right? Yeah.
yeah,
But then you got to get caught.
never going to get caught, and then we as a collective will spend $100,000 in prison that person when we could have avoided the whole thing together and figured out a way to help the person
Right.
just prevent the crime rather than punish it after and excessively and at extreme cost and in inhumane ways, which creates jobs and pensions and business and for many people. But do you really want to work in an industry that's profiting off of human suffering? Like, I know I wouldn't want to touch that with my ethics and karma.
Yeah. But look, and we've got to also look at it from the other side is that if you go through college and you've got a massive debt, and this is the job that you've got to work in, right? You may not be the
Right.
guy, at the top table, let's say it that way. But you've got to take that job. You become desensitized because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's about providing for your family, and then we're back to the lack of community. It's about that, but the reality of it is, it's not. That's the job they're employed to do. But if you're sitting at the top table and you say, right, guys, from today, we're not gonna target anybody. We're going to remove bias from all of these decisions that we have to make. Um, I'll even go a step further, and it's what we did at Finexus. We're going to anonymize your credit decision. We don't need to know who you are. You're a
Mm-hmm.
human being, and that's the qualifying criteria. And if you can manage money, that's an even bigger tick. And if you can repay the loan, that's an even bigger tick. And the default probability of default, there's another tick. Now I need to know who you are for legal reasons and do my checks and everything else. But think about that. If the people at the top made those calls, the person that we're now talking about in the middle layer doesn't work for one of those companies anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, should say, "Wow, what a change this has made."
Yeah.
And then the perception or the net promoter score for that firm starts to really climb. People start to trust you more. Your profit starts to rise. People are paid better in that job as a result of it. Think of all the positives. See, we could pick the negatives are already there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you convert a negative into a positive outcome? And
Exactly.
it starts up here. Now, if they're not willing to do it, well, we're back to the word competition, where somebody else will come and do it. And you've got nobody to blame but yourself. And we might even poach a few of those guys that work for you already and put them into our system and give them a sense of helping people rather than taking from people.
Yeah,
That's how
exactly.
you do it.
I know there are plenty of good people, and just I'm not meaning to make this about the prisons. I really want to highlight you and your and Finexos in
No, no, please.
particular.
This is important. Yeah, they're people too. How do I
They're
help
people
those
too.
people? Yeah,
Yeah,
how do I help them?
the people working in prisons are frequently traumatized by the culture
Right.
that they're embedded in, and that no one person seems to be able to change. It really does take leadership buy-in to change the culture. And I'm beginning to see this in the state of California. There are certain countries who've done
Good.
a better job of using imprisonment as an opportunity to rehabilitate and help people rather than keep them punished, and then they get out and then they get discriminated against, can't get jobs, become dependent upon the either pay their way on public assistance or become victims of their crimes. Like the whole, if you look holistically at the whole like economic system as we include crime as part of that analysis, you see that we're really incentivizing crime through our financial
Right.
systems that we've built.
Right.
So it's time for a new system. It's
Right.
time
It
for a new
is.
way of
It's here.
thinking. It's time to include our heart and our ethics and our morality and not just our brain and fear and profit or greed. Like we've got to really improve who we are to bring our best selves to the way we show up to the world, right? And one way to
Yeah.
do that is to be kind and considerate and fix the things that are broken. That's the thing I like to say is that I'm really critical of how government needs to improve, and I have a critical eye of people behaving unethically in the world. And I don't do that to point the finger so much as I do it to say that if you want to make the world a better place, it's a very basic formula. You've got to look at, well, what's the truth now? What's the end state we want, and how do we get there? But in order to figure out that plan, you have to be honest about what's not working now. You can't just ignore it. You've got to see that as part of your picture. And I think that's part of why you were able to build Finexos, is because you saw the flaws of the status quo. And that was a necessary step.
Yeah, I'm probably less judgmental, to be fair. And, even people in government make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But they're not accountable for it a lot of the time, or understand how the system works and can weave and dive and get through it. Okay, but they're people at the end of the day. In this context, you've actually said this. If you correct and equalize access to knowledge and finance, much of that problem is already gone. It's solved. Because I don't know if you had those type of conversations with the inmates, or indeed if they were released, is to say, what would you have done differently, or what would have this what may have been the impact of this happening here? Because all of us have suffered trauma of some form, so we can't just use the word trauma. I'm quite aware that if I had have used my trauma to turn that towards hatred, I could have become a really, really nasty person, bad, and put this creative mind to use in a totally different way. So again, it's having that level of control. It's remaining, even though people will have brought you down to your knees, you're begging, and they still want to kick you when you're down. And it's about building that educational framework around people to say this will happen. It build resilience from it. Here's the support that you need. We're not going to judge you any further. There are certain legal checks and stuff that we've got to go through, but we are not going to judge you as a human being. Why would I give you a lower credit score because you're divorced? What? Yeah. Why would I give you a lower credit score if you had a heart attack 3 years ago and you missed 3 payments? Why? Because I want to control you. If that's the case, I can keep you in that cycle. It's irrelevant. Why do I need to know who you are before you apply for a loan? Why? Because I get a chance to discriminate against you.
Mm.
If I don't like the look of you, remember, we used to have a situation where you'd walk into a bank, Angela, and you knew the bank manager. You grew up in a little town. Everybody knew the bank manager. You went to school with his kids and all that kind of great stuff. They grew up. You come in for a loan one day and he's like, "Oh, Angela, lovely to see you. How's it going?" "Yeah, I want to buy the house up the road there and need a mortgage." "Right, leave it with me." That's the relationship management piece that you had. Now you've gone into a situation when they issued credit scores, didn't have to sit in front of you anymore. They could make a decision about you not having ever met you, but they knew who you were. Do you see? Now,
Mhm.
by anonymizing that thing again, we're saying, well, hold on, if this person can pay this loan back to you legally, there's no other reason why they shouldn't have it. Why aren't you giving it to them?
It's much more humane, the system
Well,
you've
you
designed.
realize it's going to be socioeconomic groups. It's going to be migrants that get targeted. It's going to be single moms. It's going to be people on social benefit that get all of this. What's irrelevant? They have an income and they manage it really well. They can afford to repay X amount. Give it to them.
Give it to them. It'll make our collective experience better when more and more people start thriving and doing
Right.
well and getting out of survival mode. It benefits all of us.
And if
Yeah.
I'm driving the same car as you, and there's not competition in that respect, but if I pull up in a car next to you, I couldn't get a car loan for years because my credit rating said no. But I pull up, what's the first thing you're going to go and do? Wow, I love your car. Yeah, I've just managed to get it, but that person now feels I'm back in the game, or it's a poor example, but you get me that if you were to walk across the lawn and go, "I love your car," you don't need to know how they needed to get through the finance or anything else. The fact is that they've achieved something, yeah, and
Mhm.
and the fact that you're willing to share in that positive experience makes people feel good.
It's rehumanizing instead
It
of
really is.
dehumanizing.
Right. It
Um,
really is.
One thing I want to point out too is I think a lot about education. My doctoral degree is in
Right.
education.
Right.
And one of the things that educational systems all across the globe fail to do, they just fail to do it, is to teach financial literacy. They just
Right.
don't do it. It's not in the curriculum, it's not part of their pedagogy.
Right.
And what I love about Finexus is that you have basically built a financial literacy tool that helps train them in little daily, realistic, on the ground, practical ways for how to make good decisions to ensure that
Right.
their life can so that they can survive and get out of survival mode.
Right. It has a name. It's called FIOLA, the Financial Intelligence Online Assistant. It does exactly what it's there to do. It's there so you can ask it a question. I mean, we're in very early stages with it, to be fair, Angela, but we presented the app to the Yidinji people in Australia, the sovereign government, and what we're really saying there is that we know you haven't been to school to learn about how to manage money. I come from Ireland. I was never taught how to manage money. I'm in the UK. They don't teach kids how to manage money. Things are starting to get a bit better. There's a few apps that have come out to do, but what it is, we've got to realize that there's a knowledge gap. Now, unless everybody's going to go back to school at this age, they're not going to learn, right? So what we've got to use is technology to bridge the gap just enough so they still make the decision. That is your call to make a decision, but you're making an informed decision as opposed to, I really don't know what's going to happen here. But if you knew what the outcome was going to be, right, you're better
Mhm.
informed. You will make a decision and you probably won't take a credit product that you don't need.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you'll spend your money on something that is valuable. So you buy your house and your house increases in value. Robert Kiyosaki probably argue with me on that one. But the fact is that if you have your real estate, as you mentioned earlier on, or you have some assets that you've been able to buy, even though you financed them initially, but they're going to have some long-term value for you, well, you need to learn how that works. So we're looking at the development of large language models that actually take in the entire economic, fiscal, monetary policy the world over, to try and understand what are the outcomes that people really need and what questions are they going to ask that's relevant to their situation. How do you increase the economic viability of an entire nation, a people that's probably in the tier 4 economy space right now? um, can an AI actually bridge all of those knowledge gaps, even at government level? So you see, these are the
Mm.
things that started to build from this, because once you get it right, because my brain span is the attention of a gnat. It's yeah, when you say education, I mean, I prefer an audiobook to reading a book.
Same.
I prefer to absorb the book as opposed to, try to scan through the pages. So we've all got different learning styles.
Mhm.
That's a really important piece. We don't all absorb information the same way. Visually is probably the easiest way of doing it. And then you're into the other aspects of being able to listen to something. But what's really cool, and some things I will share with you, is the whole area of holographic information and avatars and the whole VR experience it's really cool because you can immerse yourself in situations, which is, to me now, this is the piece where I could go off quite a lot because it's so exciting to
Yeah.
think that on my mobile phone, it's here and its hologram stands up and I can ask Fiola, what would be the impact of an additional $700 spend a month on my 401 or whatever it happens to be, yeah?
Mhm.
And it was able to calculate it and tell me. And I could, if this is how I woke up in the middle of the night, like I've had a nightmare and I wake up and I could just lock, boom, it's always there. I don't have to make an appointment to see anybody. I don't have to get dressed. Don't have to do anything. It's there. Now imagine that level, and that's where I go with these things. If somebody tells me it can't be done, I guarantee you, I'm thinking about how it will be done.
Exactly. I'm like that too.
And
One of
that's
the things,
anywhere in the world. That's anywhere in the world, from the Kalahari Desert, seriously, to New York City, to the Attic, wherever you are, you'll have access to that through technology.
yeah, I love it. And people who don't have much or any financial literacy training, people who come from poverty-stricken backgrounds, like it's hard to know how to make some of these decisions, and it's hard to know like what will the consequences be. Like, and all it takes is a few bad decisions or some bad luck or some
Right?
lack of opportunity, and then you're caught in a spiral and it's almost impossible to get out. Because if you couldn't pay your bills now, but now you owe even more because you have,
Right.
you've
But
taken on debt,
that is it.
or
That's
say
that's
the debt spiral, yeah, or say that you steal something and then now you're imprisoned and your job you did have is long gone, and then now you have a record and you can't get another job. Like we've got to I think we all as human beings have got to agree that like we can do better. That system really holds a lot of us down, keeping a lot of people subjugated. It makes everybody worse off, more dependence on public assistance and
it.
all of that. Well, Mark, I one last thing I want to say, and then we probably should wrap up. This has been such a delight to
Yeah,
chat
sure.
with you. But you have the Nexos as a well-established. You mean you've been working on this for what, like 7 years?
Uh,
it's a mature technology.
right.
It's ready to go. You're waiting
Yeah.
on funding and you're ready to go change the world with this. So, and also, I mean, we didn't touch much upon the FICO score. We alluded to it, but the FICO score is the old school model. The Finexos model is the new world that will help instead of harm a lot of members of humanity.
Right.
So, um, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share about you as a strong polymath, thinking globally, using your good heart across disciplines to create solutions to help other people besides yourself? Uh, that is the ideal polymath for me. It's such an honor and a privilege to just know you. I can't wait for your efforts to really proliferate. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to anyone to know about Finexos or about your journey as a polymath, or even any tips or of advice for other people to kind of follow the path that you did to express their true capacity to make the world a
Right.
better place? What would you like to share?
I have this. There is one piece actually, Angela, and I think this is important for other polymaths. We're very, it's very hard. We are misunderstood a lot of the time. People think we're crazy. We're very grounded. It's just what we're saying is quite up there. And I remember a guy saying to me one time that, if you are indeed somebody that is a creator and you're thinking of things, he said this to me, that if people are not laughing at your ideas, they're not big enough. So I look for people laughing at me. And you turn that around from a negative into a positive. Whereas if that's some kind of indicator to me, if you don't believe it can be done, that's the moment I believe it can. And I need to find a way to do it. So if there's anybody else out there who has these kind of where people go, you're just crazy, come and speak to Angela, because you're probably not crazy. And Angela, I want to thank you, because again, without your conversation with me there, the last few conversations, I would have never known this even existed. I actually probably did think I was slightly crazy based on what people had said to me, but only for you, I now believe that this is a science, and you've done fantastic work on it. So keep up the good work is all I can say. And I'm here anytime anytime I can help.
Thank you. Well, it's such a pleasure for me to work in the polymathy space. I get to meet such amazing people, especially when I meet people who are doing global level work to help humanity. I just want to do whatever I can to help make sure that you succeed. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being on
Thanks
my
for having me.
channel. Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope that you learned a lot. Make sure to check out Finexos. All right, bye everyone.